Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. The state government is having an extremely difficult time keeping employees and hiring new ones. It's something we told you about in an episode back in February, so I encourage you to go check that out. Since then, a battle has begun to brew over wages for state workers, and it's about to heat up as lawmakers start negotiating the annual budget. WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain has been covering the issue, and he joins us now. Travis, welcome back.
Hello.
So you wrote an article on this battle over wages at WRAL.com, and you started with an interesting stat. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so something like 37% of people who come to work for state government agencies leave before 1 year is out, and it's way higher in some of the toughest to staff jobs, which is state hospitals, nurses at state hospitals, people who work in the prison system. That's up near 50%. And so this constant turnover produces a cost, and it's hard to say, well, how much does it cost just the first year people leaving? But based on some kind of industry standard math that the State Office of Human Resources has done, they figure turnover throughout the workforce, regardless of how many years someone's been there, costs the state something like $500 million a year.
And that's lost knowledge. It's, I'm guessing, hiring new people, training them. What else goes into that figure?
It's all sorts of things, but I mean, the way the figure is actually calculated is they take a salary, the median salary, and they multiply it by the number of people they lose. And I mean, various big-time accounting firms say this is kind of how you estimate it. It is an estimate, how you estimate the cost of just constant turnover.
So that begs the obvious question, why can't the state keep workers?
I mean, it's a lot of factors, but pay is a big one. I mean, for years, the expectation was, well, if you go to work for state government, you know, the pay won't be as good as private industry, but the benefits will be better. You know, that has shifted a bit. The benefits aren't as good as they used to be. One of the big things that changed in 2021 was anyone newly hired by the state would not have health insurance when they retired. You know, but before 2021, if you worked for the state of North Carolina and you worked 20 years and you retired, your health care was still covered going forward as a retiree. That is no longer the case. So just the difference in benefits is changing, and then salaries have lagged what the private sector is doing, and particularly that's been exacerbated in the last couple of years as, you know, the pandemic has just shook up the workforce. Inflation has made things cost more. You know, more and more jobs pay better. And it's just been, the state has not been able or willing, maybe is the better word, to keep up.
So you mentioned it, but one obvious solution is pay people more. And I understand that's a debate that's about to heat up, right?
Yeah, so the way the state budget works, and of course, what state employees are paid depends on the state budget. The governor has his shot and says, all right, here's what I think. And then the House of Representatives has their shot and says, here's what we think. And those two things have happened. But this week, the state Senate is going to release its budget. And that's kind of the third leg of this chair that we need before things move forward. And then the House and the Senate, which are both controlled by the Republican Party. So the governor won't have a ton of say because the Republicans are in control at the legislature and have the numbers to do what they want here. But the House and Senate will say, all right, let's negotiate away our differences. And that ultimately will produce a handful of numbers, which one of them will be across-the-board raises for state employees, how much they will get. The House proposal was 7.5% over 2 years, so not a 7.5% raise all at once, but over the next 2 years. The Senate will have a different number, and then they'll come to an agreement on that, and they'll come to an agreement also on money that has been used to give state agencies flexibility to boost salaries beyond that across-the-board raise in really hard-to-fill jobs. And so that'll be a much more complicated calculus. You know, in the past, for example, state troopers are probably going to get a bigger raise this year, based at least on what the House said, and we'll see what the Senate does. But, I mean, there's all sorts of different jobs that have become difficult to fill.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about what the state is doing to keep state employees. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain about the state's efforts to recruit and retain workers. Travis, the state needs to figure this out quickly, right? You know, in addition to existing vacancies, there are more in the way, right?
Yeah, I mean, vacancies are at or near an all-time high in a lot of agencies. The state population has increased. So, I mean, people are kind of getting less service from their state government. I think people have probably noticed, like if you've been to the DMV boy, if you work in a North Carolina prison, you are really feeling this, and it's dangerous, right? It's dangerous to have too many vacancies among correctional workers because there's a reason that we have a certain number of guards in a prison. So what's going to come up next, though, could also be kind of a big concern because there are a lot of people who are at or approaching retirement age. Something like 26% of the current state workforce is within 5 years of being able to retire with full benefits. Something like 8.5% could retire with full benefits tomorrow. So we could kind of see this exodus of a significant amount of the workforce in the next few years, and on top of the problems we've got right now.
So what does this look like on the ground? You mentioned the DMV, you mentioned state prisons. What other agencies are feeling it?
Almost all of them, but one that I think is kind of interesting is the Office of Human Resources, and that's kind of a two-ply answer. One, there is the Office of State Human Resources, which is, they handle, obviously, human resources stuff statewide, but individual agencies also have their own human resources people because you can imagine, hiring is, you're just constantly doing it in some of these jobs. And one of the places where they're having trouble keeping workers is in human resources. So you're not getting enough applicants for jobs, and then the applicants that you are getting, there are delays in processing them and moving them through. I mean, y'all can imagine it's kind of a bureaucratic process to go to work for state government. And the people that do that, they're having vacancy issues. And so what I've been told is that people are in the queue to get hired, but we can't move fast enough to hire them before they get another job.
So when those preferred candidates move on, there's got to be someone behind them, right?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. One of the things I found really interesting in this story was a statistic from the Office of Human Resources. They say that if you take 2019, so before the pandemic, and compare it to last year, 2022, the number of applications that the state is getting for jobs is down 43%. That's such a big difference. So, I mean, that pipeline is really a lot different now than it was back before the pandemic.
So the state's got to be doing some other things beyond looking at raising salaries, right?
They want to do some structural reforms, some of which is going to need some legislative approval. One thing would be continuously posting jobs instead of getting approval to post a job. If you know you're going to have churn, go ahead and continually post that. Another is what's called, I believe, pooled applications. So if you apply for one job in state government, you actually are applying for a whole bunch of them, or at least they can say, hey, what do you think about, maybe this other thing? And another is the flexibility to hire people on the spot. So you come in for a job interview, I'm hiring you, and I think, well, this guy's great. Let me just pull the trigger on this. They want permission to do that contingent on like a background check, but so that it's almost like getting someone to buy a used car, right? Like now, let's sign on the dotted line now.
That $500 million in losses just due to turnover, that's an enormous figure. What do lawmakers say and state employees say about how to reduce that figure?
So the State Employees Association says, well, look, we want you to raise salaries. Here's a big pot of money, because obviously we're not just losing it last year. We would expect to have some version of that loss in the future. So they say, well, instead of burning that money, setting it on fire because you have this churn, let's plan ahead. Let's pay people more. Let's fix the churn, or at least address the churn issue, and then we won't have those losses. Now, state lawmakers, budget writers say, well, it's not that simple. You can't guarantee that you're not going to have the churn. It's a cost estimate. It's not an actual number. And sometimes vacancies, obviously vacancies save money in the budget, right? From a certain point of view. If you have open jobs, you're not spending that money. And one of the things that over the years has been done by different state agencies is they dip into those savings, the money they're not paying employees because there's no employee there, and they use it for other things. For example, in the prison system for years and years and years, that's been used to cover inmate health. That can be very expensive to pay for prisoners' health needs. And so that's where they've dipped into it. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, I think, is the bottom line here. And there's also some question among Republican budget writers about how much of a difference will a salary increase make? How much do you have to boost a salary before you address the churn in a really meaningful way? And can the state afford to do that? I think you're going to see significant raises. Now, the word significant, that maybe is a little bit of a weasel word that I can't tell you how much it's going to be if you're a state employee listening to this. Senator Phil Berger, who is the chief Republican leader in the state Senate, he said that he wants to do more, particularly on the front end for those entry-level salaries, which is kind of a acknowledgement that the first year churn is something that's really bothering the state.
So in short, just offer more money to entice them into the job and hope they'll stick around.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. Once you hit a year, you're much more likely to stick around.
So what happens next?
So next is the Senate budget comes out, and then those negotiations we talked about happen. The House and the Senate leaders will probably come to some agreement between now and July 1st, which is when the new fiscal year begins for the state of North Carolina.
Well, we know you'll be all over it. Thanks, Travis.
Absolutely.
That's WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain. For his in-depth look at the state government's employee retention problem, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.